for the 75th anniversary of the Great Victory. For the first time ever, more than 1,500 meters of film reels never before published have been digitized and brought together in one place. I cannot watch this footage without emotion because, exactly 75 years ago, I was just over 12 years old. We, the boys of that time, dreamed of seeing the victory parade on Red Square with our own eyes. But of course, we couldn't be there, unfortunately. Television didn't exist back then. But today, you have the opportunity to see this parade in its entirety, minute by minute. Footage from the special vault of the Russian State Archive of Film and Photo Documents. The legendary Victory Parade of 1945, a unique chance to immerse yourself in the real atmosphere of that time, to see the unedited reality. The 24th of June, 1945, early morning. The combined regiments of the fronts of the valiant Red Army are marching toward Red Square and to their designated parade formations. Despite the early hour, the streets are already crowded. Everyone wants to be part of the most important event in the country, an event long dreamed of during the harsh years of war, and one that will remain in every heart forever. The parade participants began arriving in the capital as early as the 10th of June for rehearsals of the grand ceremony. They were housed in Moscow barracks. This morning, reveille was sounded at 4 a.m. From the Alyoshinsky barracks, Major General Manzurin leads a company of tankers from the Leningrad front. The soldiers are marching along Krutitskaya embankment toward their parade formation site on Red Square. Hero of the Soviet Union, Major General Baklanov, commands the combined regiment of the 1st Ukrainian Front. Taking part in this unforgettable event, the Victory Parade is also the legendary pilot, Colonel Pokrishkin, thrice awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. His name is known around the world. On the left, we see Soviet military commander, Colonel General of the Armored Forces, Volsky. In this triumphant march of victors, combined regiments of the 10 fronts that were active by the end of the war will take part. Also marching in the parade are the combined regiment of the People's Commissariat of the Navy and the troops of the Moscow garrison. Along Novaya Square, past the Polytechnic Museum, soldiers of the 2nd Ukrainian Front are marching from Sokolniki. The commander of the combined regiment leads the formation. Behind him, the standard of the front is carried. The front standards were made specifically for the parade. The prop workshop of the Bolshoi Theater and various artistic production studios accomplished this complex task in just 10 days. Each oak staff is topped with a golden star surrounded by a silver laurel wreath of victory. The crimson velvet standard, adorned with gold tassels and script, weighs 10 kilograms. Following the standard and the command formation is the color guard. The standard bearers carry the banners of the armies and regiments of the front that most distinguished themselves in battle. Each ribbon on the banner represents a collective act of heroism recognized by a military order. Along Petrovka Street, Past the Bolshoi Theater building marches the parade formation of the Combined Regiment of the Naval Commissariat. Here are sailors from the Northern, Baltic, and Black Sea fleets, as well as from the Dnieper and Danube River flotillas. From Strominka marches the combined battalion of Kuban Cossacks of the 2nd Ukrainian Front, commanded by Guards Major General Pavlov. Hundreds of thousands of Cossacks were enlisted in the regular ranks of the Red Army. They served in infantry, artillery, armored units, and aviation. A total of 262 Cossacks were awarded the high title of Hero of the Soviet Union. Hero of the Soviet Union, Guards Lieutenant Colonel Kostelev commands the 1st Company of the Combined Battalion of Kuban Cossacks. From the Chernyshevsky barracks, the Combined Regiment of the 3rd Belarusian Front is making its way through the center of Moscow, approaching Red Square. Only the most distinguished soldiers from all branches of service were selected to join the combined regiments for the parade Valiant Warriors. Infantrymen, artillerymen, tank crews, sappers, and signal troops. Just as they had fought side by side in battle, now they march shoulder to shoulder. Here comes the combined regiment of the 4th Ukrainian Front. Marching in full dress uniform is the field band of the regiment. Once on Red Square, the musicians will join the main massed parade orchestra. Parade participants were carefully selected from among the most decorated fighters, heroes of the Soviet Union, recipients of the Order of Glory, and all those who had demonstrated courage, heroism, bravery, and combat skill. The best men of the fronts, descendants of Suvorov's eagles, they struck the enemy with resolve and precision, following the principles of Soviet military science. Now comes the combined regiment of the Navy. Above their sailor caps, 5 naval ensigns flutter in the wind. Among them is the battle flag of the legendary cruiser Aurora. On one of the standards, the Guard St. George ribbon is clearly visible. The first to march is the battalion of Black Sea sailors. Behind them follow the Dnieper flotilla, the Danube flotilla, and cadets of the higher naval academies. Alongside the Red Army soldiers, there were other fighters on the battlefield. They too brought victory closer with their courage, resilience, and heroism. Combat vehicles are also assembling at their designated parade positions. Towed by Ya-12 tractors, powerful A-19 field guns pass by. One of the cameramen has positioned his camera on the roof of the Bolshoi Theater. From here, you can clearly see the formations of the Airborne Battalion and the Motorized Infantry Regiment. On one of the squares, alongside the air defense troops, stands the 2nd Anti-Aircraft Searchlight Division with vehicles of the Prozvuk sound locating system. Nearby, the troops of the Moscow garrison are in formation. Soldiers of the anti-tank artillery units, who fought on the front lines, are easily identified by the distinctive patch on their left sleeve. the 1st Independent Motor Rifle Division of Special Purpose. During the war, it carried out many tasks related to securing the rear. As part of the 1943 uniform reform, shoulder straps and metal bars were introduced. For internal troops, double-breasted tunics, crimson shoulder straps, and formal cap bands were adopted. 4,000 soldiers from 2 People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs divisions stand on Revolution Square, awaiting the start of the parade. Behind them, companies of military dog trainers are lined up. The Fountain of Victory has not yet been turned on, and guests are ascending from Vasilyevsky descent toward the stands near the Kremlin wall. Legendary commanders are also gathering, some to march in the parade formations at the head of their fronts, others to take honorary places in the stands. Hero of the Soviet Front, Hero of the Soviet Union, Army General Sokolovsky, Chief of Staff of several fronts, Hero of the Soviet Union, Colonel General Zhmachenko. The parade's chief conductor, Major General Chernetsky, composer of the military marches that will be played today at the Victory Parade. Hero of the Soviet Union, Colonel General Kalpakchi, commander of the 69th Army. Twice Hero of the Soviet Union, Colonel General Katakov, commander of the 1st Guards Tank Army. On Gorky Street, formidable military equipment is lined up. Units of armored, mechanized, and artillery forces of the Moscow garrison stand ready for the ceremonial march. Today, these powerful weapons will follow not a combat course, but a parade one. Here are self-propelled artillery units, combat vehicles with barrel guns on self-propelled chassis. Their main task is delivering fire in combination with positional maneuvering. A true triumph of Soviet weaponry, from the small Su-76 to the giant ISU-152. The Su-100 self-propelled guns, the best tank destroyers on the battlefield. On the opposite lane, to the right, stand formidable howitzers, the ML-20 guns of 152mm caliber, towed by Ya-12 tractors. Nicknamed Yemelia by the soldiers, these guns were the primary heavy artillery system. The high-speed tractor was produced at the Yaroslavl tractor plant. Further up Gorky Street, the legendary T-34 tanks are lined up, the unsurpassed symbol of our victory. Soviet heavy tanks. Joseph Stalin, one of the strongest and most heavily armored tanks of World War II. Standing alongside the tank crews and combat vehicles of the 8th Tank Regiment is the regiment's commander, Colonel Matochkin. In the Combined Motorcycle Battalion, 169 heavy M72 motorcycles will ride in the parade. The sidecar is equipped with a Degtyaryov machine gun, and the crew consists of a commander, a machine gunner, and a driver. To the left is the commander of the Simferopol Motorcycle Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Nedilko. The crew is also armed with PPS submachine guns. Near the central telegraph office, a battalion of light armored cars is assembled. The BA-64 became the first domestically produced all-wheel drive armored car. Despite the bad weather and early hour, the street is lively. Everyone wants to see the heroes, people of unparalleled courage and bravery, those who crushed and expelled the enemy from the motherland, who liberated Europe, marched to the lair of fascism, and captured the Reichstag. Today, they will all march in parade formation across the country's main square. The Spasskaya Tower of the Kremlin strikes 9. Just 1 hour remains until the parade begins. Red Square. Its name is bound to the centuries-old glory of our people. Time and again, enemies have tried to bring us to our knees. But every time, our warriors stood as one to defend the motherland and shattered the enemy's might into dust. From Red Square, our troops marched off to war in solemn formation, and here they returned victorious. From here, regiments departed to defend Moscow on the 7th of November, 1941. It was here that the words foretelling our coming victory first rang out, words that stirred every heart. And today, once again, the country gathers on Red Square to welcome its heroes, its brave sons and daughters returned in triumph. Here stand those who forced the Dnieper and the Oder, who stormed the snow-covered Carpathian passes, who restored freedom to Kiev and Minsk, who liberated Sevastopol and Odessa, who fought in the streets of Budapest, Königsberg, and Vienna, and who raised the banner of our victory over Berlin. At the Spassky Gates, frontline veterans stand in parade formation. Lowered to the ground are the Nazi standards, the symbols of vanquished fascist Germany. Today, the enemy banners of Hitler's shattered armies lie at the victor's feet. The standards of the SS Totenkopf Division, elite Wehrmacht formations, the Keitel and Guderian divisions, the SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, On Red Square, the regiments of the war front stand in parade formation, the very fronts that brought the war to its end. They are lined up in the same order in which they held the front lines, precisely matching the disposition of the combat fronts from north to south, from the Arctic Ocean to the Black Sea, from the Karelian to the 3rd Ukrainian Front. Closing the parade formation is the Composite Regiment of the People's Commissariat of the Navy. Renowned commanders, celebrated across the world, now move to join their respective fronts. Here are Yeryomenko, Govorov, Vasilevsky, Konev, Bagramyan, Meretskov, and Tolbukin. Marshal Malinovsky greets the army commanders of the 2nd Ukrainian Front. The marshals of the Soviet Union stand beside their fronts. Marshal Meretskov, hero of the Soviet Union and commander of the Karelian Front, who took part in breaking the Leningrad blockade and inflicted defeats on Finnish and German forces in the northern sector. Air Marshal Skripko, Deputy Commander of Long-Range Aviation. Marshal Bovarov, hero of the Soviet Union, a veteran of the Battle of Moscow. Under his command, the Leningrad Front shattered the siege ring around Leningrad and liberated the Baltic states. Army General Bagramyan, hero of the Soviet Union, who led the liberation of Belarus, Lithuania, and Latvia. He commanded forces during the assault on Königsberg and the destruction of the enemy's Zemland grouping. Today, he leads the 1st Baltic Front in the parade. Lieutenant General Lopatin, hero of the Soviet Union, commands the Composite Regiment. At the head of the 3rd Belarusian Front stands Marshal Vasilevsky, hero of the Soviet Union. As Chief of the General Staff, he played a key role in planning and executing all major operations on the Soviet-German front. Hero of the Soviet Union, Lieutenant General of Tank Forces Butkov. Among the army commanders of the 2nd Belarusian Front stands Colonel General Batov, twice hero of the Soviet Union, a veteran of the Battle of Stalingrad. Lieutenant General Rostov commands the Composite Regiment of the 2nd Belarusian Front. The soldiers of the 1st Belarusian Front march alongside Colonel General Zhukov, twice hero of the Soviet Union, famed for his role in the defense of Stalingrad and known as General Storm. Fighting alongside the 1st Belarusian Front for the freedom and independence of democratic Poland were the troops of the Polish Army. Leading the 20 battle standards of Polish formations in the parade is Polish General and Red Army Colonel General Korchik. Alongside General of the Armored Forces of the Polish Army, Karol Świerczewski. The 1st Ukrainian Front. At its head marches Marshal Konev, twice hero of the Soviet Union, who commanded the front in the Battle of Kursk, led the liberation of Ukraine, and stormed Berlin. Hero of the Soviet Union, Major General Baklin. The standard bearer is Colonel Pokryshkin, 3-time hero of the Soviet Union. Also present is Guards Major Glinka, fighter ace, and twice hero of the Soviet Union. Marshal of Armored Forces Rybalko, twice hero of the Soviet Union, distinguished in the Battle of the Dnieper, the Kursk salient, and the Kiev offensive. Hero of the Soviet Union, Lieutenant General of Tank Forces Zhukov. Commanding the 4th Ukrainian Front is Army General Yeryomenko, hero of the Soviet Union, who led the Stalingrad front and spearheaded the liberation of the Baltic states and eastern Czechoslovakia.
Командовал Сталинградским фронтом, освобождал Прибалтику и Восточную Чехословакию.
The glorious banners of the Second Ukrainian Front will be led in the parade by Marshal of the Soviet Union Malinovsky. The troops under his command liberated Stalingrad, Rostov-on-Don, Donbass, and southern Ukraine, then crushed the enemy in Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Austria. Alongside the Third Ukrainian Front, Marshal Tolbukin commanded armies in the Battle of Stalingrad and led the liberation of Yugoslavia, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Austria.
Сталинградской битве, при освобождении Югославии, Румынии, Болгарии, Венгрии, Австрии.
Lieutenant General Biryukov, hero of the Soviet Union, commands the Composite Regiment. The Composite Regiment of the People's Commissariat of the Navy is led by Vice Admiral Fadiev, whose name is tied to victories on the Black Sea.
Его имя связано с победами на Черном море.
Here they stand the legendary defenders of Sevastopol, Novorossiysk, and Odessa.
Севастополя, Новороссийска, Одессы.
The granite stands by the Kremlin wall, filled with honored guests.
Кремлевской стены заполняются почетными гостями.
Frontline veterans, military leaders, and high command representatives.
Военачальники и представители командования.
Among them, approaches Colonel General Vorobyov of the Coastal Service, a veteran of World War I and full cavalier of the Cross of St. George.
Полный кавалер Георгиевского креста.
Marshal Zhukov, commander of naval aviation.
Командующий авиацией военно-морского флота.
Marshal Rotmistrov, who led tank forces at Stalingrad, the Battle of Kursk, and other major engagements of the Great Patriotic War.
В битве на Курской дуге, других крупных сражениях Отечественной войны.
A legend of the Civil War, Colonel General Gorodovikov, deputy commander of cavalry under Marshal Budionni.
Городовиков, заместитель главнокомандующего кавалерии маршала Буденного.
Lieutenant General Telegin, with his wife, alongside Yulia Rokossovskaya, wife of Marshal Rokossovsky.
Жена маршала Рокоссовского.
Admiral Alafuzov, chief of the main naval staff of the USSR Navy.
Главного морского штаба военно-морского флота СССР.
The square is packed with guests. The stands by the mausoleum cannot hold them all. Additional grandstands have been built along the main facade of the State Department store specifically for the parade, now filled to capacity with military personnel, commissariat officials, and cadets.
Дополнительные трибуны. Они до отказа заполнены военными, работниками наркоматов, курсантами.
Deputies of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR march forward production leaders, heroes of socialist labor, distinguished Stakhanovites, and order-bearing workers.
Видные стахановцы-орденоносцы.
Approaching the guest stands is twice hero of the Soviet Union, Arctic explorer, and Rear Admiral Papanin, whose legendary Papanin 4 gained worldwide fame by spending 274 days on an ice floe conducting groundbreaking scientific research.
Проведя 274 дня на дрейфующей линии, занимаясь научными исследованиями.
First Deputy People's Commissar for Foreign Affairs Comrade Vyshinsky joins the stands, the very man who delivered Germany's unconditional surrender act to Berlin.
Он привез в Берлин текст акта о безоговорочной капитуляции Германии.
Representatives of the Russian Orthodox Church also take their places.
Представители Русской православной церкви.
Archpriest Alexander Smirnov, Proto-Presbyter Nikolai Kolchitsky, and Metropolitan Nikolai of Krutitsy,
Митрополит Крутицкий,
who in March 1944 traveled to the front to hand over a tank column fully funded by church donations to the Red Army.
Красной армии танковой колонны, полностью построенной на пожертвования верующих.
Voluntary wartime contributions became a national movement, Citizens funded hundreds of tank columns, air squadrons, warships, and armored trains.
танковых колонн, авиаэскадрильи, корабли, бронепоезда.
Workers, collective farmers, artists, and scientists, united in devotion to the motherland, stood behind the front lines in its darkest hour.
Как один, скрепленный преданностью Родине, в ее трудный час поддержали фронт.
Officers of the 1st Motor Rifle Division of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs' Moscow garrison maintained security along the square's perimeter.
Дивизии войск НКВД Московского гарнизона.
Foreign journalists and correspondents from major global news agencies moved through the crowd.
Представители ведущих информационных агентств мира.
Among the honored guests are diplomatic and military attachés from various nations,
Представители дипломатических и военных миссий различных государств.
some in traditional bicorn hats, preserving European ceremonial uniform customs. The bicorn hats were often adorned with colored plumes and gold or silver braiding.
Двурогие шляпы бикон. Двууголки, часто украшенные цветными перьями, золотой или серебряной оплеткой.
The ambassador of the United States of America, Mr. Harry Mann,
Соединенных Штатов Америки,
an advisor to U.S. President Roosevelt, took his place,
президента Рузвельта.
accompanied by staff from the U.S. Embassy.
Посольство Соединенных Штатов.
Nearby stood the Japanese military and naval attachés.
Морской атташе Японии.
British military attaché officers approached, carrying traditional riding crops, a distinctive element of their parade uniforms.
Частью парадной униформы подходят офицеры британского военного атташе.
Colonel Petit, head of the French military mission in the USSR, joined the stands. He had played a key role in organizing French units within the Red Army, including the legendary Normandy-Niemen Fighter Regiment.
Частей в составе Красной Армии, в том числе легендарного авиаполка Нормандия-Неман.
The American military mission in Moscow was led by Major General Dean, whose office oversaw the Lend-Lease program and coordinated Allied combat operations.
Его аппарат курировал программу Ленд-Лиза и координировал совместные боевые операции союзников.
Romanian and Bulgarian officers stood out in their distinctive caps, tall-crowned with braided cords and pronounced visors.
Фуражки с объемной тульей, позументом и выразительным козырьком.
Representatives of the Republic of China's military mission gathered near the mausoleum, alongside naval and air attachés. Military interpreters assigned to the foreign delegations would soon witness the victors' parade, a demonstration of the Red Army's undying glory, the might of its arms, and the courage of its soldiers, who had freed humanity from its most terrible foe.
Военные переводчики.
Они увидят парад победителей, демонстрацию немеркнущей славы Красной Армии, величие и мощь ее оружия, мужественных и самоотверженных воинов, освободивших человечество от его злейшего врага.
The Red Square grandstands filled with honored guests,
Площади заполнены участниками почетных
scientists, artists, engineers, doctors, all eager to share in the joy of this historic celebration.
инженеры, врачи. Все хотят разделить радость великого праздника.
Today, the best teams of frontline cameramen are working on the square.
Работают лучшие группы фронтовых.
Many of them marched through the entire war alongside the valiant Red Army, ending it in liberated Europe. Their primary weapon was and remains the movie camera.
на Европе. Их главным оружием была и остается кинокамера.
Red Square is richly decorated with scarlet victory banners, red flags, and posters.
Алыми победными знаменами, красными стягами и транспарантами.
On the State Department store building, there are banners, featuring portraits of the leaders of the world proletariat and the emblems of the Soviet republics.
союзных республик.
A special 26-meter Fountain of the Victors has been erected for the Victory Parade.
Воздвигнут 26-метровый фонтан победителей.
The base of the fountain is adorned with flowers and wreaths.
Украшена цветами и венками.
Along its cascading streams, reaching skyward, a true water salute shoots into the air. The shimmering jets of water, racing one another, are visible from afar. Crowning the fountain is a scaled-down replica of the famous worker and kolkhoz woman sculpture. Gazing forward, they hold aloft a shining star, the guiding light of the victors.
Известной скульптуры рабочего и колхозницы. Глядя вперед, они держат озаряющую путь звезду победителей.
Red Square, filled with troops, is ready for this stirring event. The parade of victors, the parade of heroes, the parade of those who saved and preserved peace on the planet.
Героев, параду тех, кто спас и сохранил мир на планете.
Today, there are no strangers on Red Square. Everyone has contributed their share and earned their place. The leaders of the party and government,
Лепту в победу.
are making their way toward Red Square. Comrades Molotov, Mikoyan, Voroshilov, Voznesensky, Kaganovich,
Товарищи Молотов, Микоян, Ворошилов, Вознесенский, Каганович,
comrades Kalinin, Andreev, Zhanov,
Андреев, Жданов,
comrade Stalin.
товарищ Сталин,
They walk through the Kremlin grounds along the building of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR.
Президиума Верховного Совета СССР.
Comrades Beria,
Товарищ
Malenkov,
Берия, Маленков,
comrade Vyshinsky,
товарищ Верник,
and the country's leaders proceed along the Kremlin wall, approaching the Spassky Gate.
Кремлевской стены подходят к Спасским воротам.
Prominent Red Army commanders are heading toward the mausoleum's podium. Generals Popov, Kolpakshy, Katakov, Chuikov, Davidovsky, Gorbatov, commanders of the First Belarusian Front,
Давидовский, Горбатов, командармы Первого Белорусского фронта.
generals of the Polish armored forces, and army commanders Poplavsky and Korchitz.
Командармы Поплавский и Корчиц.
Commanders of the Third Belarusian Front take their positions. Generals Krukin, Galitsky, Ozerov, Gusev, Beloborodov, and Shafranov.
Гусев, Белобородов, Шафранов.
Inside the mausoleum, comrades Stalin, Budyani, and Molotov make their entrance.
Буденный, Молотов.
Standing guard near the mausoleum is Lieutenant General Vlasic, head of Stalin's personal security detail.
Власик.
Amid thunderous applause, Comrade Stalin emerges from the mausoleum.
Товарищ Сталин выходит из мавзолея.
To the crowd's jubilant cheers, members of the Soviet government ascend the rostrum, led by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, Marshal of the Soviet Union, Comrade Stalin.
Командующим маршалом Советского Союза товарищем Сталиным.
Following them come prominent Red Army commanders, marshals, and generals who shaped the course of the war.
Полководцы, маршалы и генералы Красной Армии.
The guest tribunes erupt in admiration as Comrade Stalin appears atop the mausoleum.
Приветствуют появившегося на мавзолее товарища Сталина.
On the mausoleum rostrum stand, members of the Central Committee Politburo, senior leaders of the Communist Party and Soviet government,
Советского Союза.
flanking Comrade Stalin are Comrade Molotov, People's Commissar for Foreign Affairs,
Народный комиссар иностранных дел СССР.
Marshal Budyani, Commander of Red Army Cavalry,
Командующий кавалерией Красной Армии.
Comrade Mikoyan, People's Commissar for Foreign Trade,
Комиссар внешней торговли СССР.
Comrade Shkiryatov, Deputy Chairman of the Party Control Commission,
Председателя комитета партийного
Comrade Andreev, People's Commissar for Agriculture,
Народный комиссар земли.
Comrade Kaganovich, Deputy Chairman of the Council of People's Commissars,
председателя Совнаркома.
Comrade Voznesensky, Chairman of Gosplan,
Председатель Госплана СССР.
Comrade Khrushchev, Chairman of the Ukrainian SSR Council of People's Commissars,
комиссаров украинского
Comrade Vernik, First Deputy Chairman of the Supreme Soviet Presidium,
заместитель председателя Президиума Верховного Совета СССР.
Comrade Malenkov, Deputy Chairman of the Council of People's Commissars,
Председателя Совнаркома.
Comrade Beria, People's Commissar of Internal Affairs of the USSR,
Внутренних дел СССР.
Colonel General Janov, General Bulganin, Deputy People's Commissar of Defense of the USSR.
Заместитель наркома обороны.
In the center, Admiral Kuznetsov, People's Commissar of the Navy.
Народный комиссар военно-морского
To the right,
флота.
Marshal Timoshenko.
Маршал Тимошенко.
The most thrilling and solemn moment is approaching.
Самый волнующий и торжественный момент.
It will be remembered for years to come.
Он запомнится всем на долгие годы.
Only a few minutes remain before the parade begins.
Минуты остаются до начала парада.
From the Grand Kremlin Palace emerges Marshal Georgy Zhukov, three-time hero of the Soviet Union.
Герой Советского Союза маршал Георгий Жуков.
Accompanied by his aide-de-camp, Major General Zelensky, Marshal Zhukov rides toward the Spassky Gates.
Маршал Жуков скачет в сторону Спасских ворот.
As he approaches the gates,
Перед
he
Спасскими
slows his
воротами
horse.
Маршал замедляет ход.
By the historical museum atop his black steed, Marshal Rokossovsky awaits the chime of the Kremlin clock to begin the parade.
Маршал Рокоссовский ждет боя курантов, чтобы начать парад.
The square stands still in anticipation.
Площадь замерла в ожидании.
The victory parade begins.
Начинается.
With the first strike of the Kremlin chimes, Marshal of the Soviet Union Georgy Zhukov rides onto Red Square.
Советского Союза Георгий Жуков выезжает на Красную площадь.
Toward him, saluting with his saber raised high, gallops Marshal Rokossovsky.
Скачет маршал Рокоссовский.
At the center of the formation, opposite the mausoleum, the marshals meet.
Маршалы встречаются.
The parade commander, Marshal Rokossovsky, reports to the reviewing officer, Marshal Zhukov, and presents him with the parade report.
Ему парад маршалу Жукову и вручает строевую записку.
The document details the number of personnel, weapons, and military equipment assembled on the square and ready for the parade.
Техники, находящихся на площади и готовых к параду.
The marshals solemnly ride along the troops, congratulating the parade participants on the victory over Germany.
Участников парада с победой над Германией.
A thunderous hurrah echoes across Red Square.
Сносится над Красной площадью. Маршалы останавливаются перед строем у белых меток на брусчатке.
The marshals continue their inspection of the troops stationed across the square.
стоящих на площадях революции, охотного ряда, улицы Горького и Манежной площади.
Twice hero of the Soviet Union, Konstantin Rokossovsky, Marshal of two nations, the USSR and the Polish People's Republic. He commanded the armies of the Western Front, the First and Second Belarusian Fronts. He fought in the Battle of Moscow, the Battle of Stalingrad, and the Battle of Kursk, liberated Belorussia and Poland, and led forces in the Berlin Strategic Offensive Operation.
Руководил войсками в Берлинской наступательной операции.
Thrice hero of the Soviet Union, Marshal Georgy Zhukov, Chief of the General Staff, member of the Supreme High Command Headquarters, First Deputy Supreme Commander-in-Chief. He commanded the Leningrad, Western, First Ukrainian, and First Belarusian fronts.
Командующий Ленинградским, Западным, Первым Украинским и Первым Белорусским фронтами.
To the majestic strains of Glinka's Glory, the commanders return to Red Square via the Kremlin Passage.
проезду полководцы возвращаются на Красную площадь.
The ceremonial troop inspection is complete. The forces are ready for the parade.
Войска к параду готовы.
At the mausoleum, Marshal Zhukov dismounts
Маршал Жуков спешивается.
and proceeds to the podium to address the troops of beauty, the armies, and the entire Soviet people.
Армии, всему советскому народу.
In front of the mausoleum, a group of fanfare players, led by military conductor and composer Colonel Agapkin, author of the famous March Farewell of Slavyanka,
Агапкина, автора известного марша «Прощание славянки». Звучит сигнал, слушайте все.
comrades, Red Army soldiers and Red Navy sailors, sergeants and petty officers, officers of the Army and Navy, generals and admirals, comrades, workers, and working women, collective farmers and collective farm women, workers in science, technology, and art, employees of Soviet institutions and enterprises, My fellow fighters, on behalf of and at the behest of the Soviet government and the All-Union Communist Party, Bolsheviks, I greet and congratulate you on the great victory over German imperialism. Today, the capital of our motherland, Moscow, in the name of the fatherland, honors the valiant Soviet warriors who achieved this victory. Today, the victorious warriors, stalwart pupils of Stalin's military school, will carry their battle standards, covered in the immortal glory of countless victories, through the streets of Moscow and past the walls of the ancient Kremlin. 4 years ago, the German fascist hordes launched a treacherous attack on our country. The Soviet people were forced to abandon peaceful labor and take up arms to defend the honor, freedom, and independence of their fatherland. The war with fascist Germany, this cunning and formidable enemy, was a severe and harrowing trial for us. As Comrade Stalin stated, it was a matter of life and death for the Soviet state, of life and death for the peoples of the Soviet Union. A question of whether our people would remain free or fall into enslavement. In the first year of the war, the situation was unfavorable for us. We suffered military setbacks and faced moments of desperate peril. The enemy advanced toward the heart of our motherland, Moscow, and prepared to celebrate victory. Time, not only our foes but even many of our friends abroad believed the Red Army could not withstand the crushing might of the German war machine. But our Soviet people, our Red Army, did not lose heart. Armed with Stalin's genius foresight and inspired by the party of Lenin and Stalin, we remained steadfast in our faith in the triumph of our just cause. Defending every inch of our sacred soil, displaying miracles of heroism in battle, Soviet troops relentlessly learned to strike the enemy, and by the principles of Stalin's military science, they mastered it. After repelling the German onslaught, the Red Army, under the leadership of the brilliant commander Marshal Stalin, launched a decisive counteroffensive. It drove the enemy from Soviet soil, carried the war into Germany, crushed the Hitlerite army, and raised the banner of victory over Berlin. Thus, the arrogant German invaders met the same fate as all others who had dared encroach upon our sacred land. Those who raised a sword against us perished by that sword. Through the united efforts of the great powers, the Soviet Union, the United States of America, and Great Britain, fascist Germany was brought to its knees. Its monstrous war machine lay in ruins. The criminal Hitlerite regime was destroyed. The night of German fascist aggression in Europe was over. Humanity was delivered from its most vicious enemy, German fascism. The Great Patriotic War had ended. A victory unparalleled in history had been achieved. The sources of this great victory were our socialist system, the wise leadership of the Bolshevik Party, the correct policies of the Soviet government, the moral and political unity of our peoples, the invincible might of the Red Army, and the heroic labor of the Soviet people. We triumphed because the world had our great leader and brilliant commander, the Marshal of the Soviet Union, Stalin. Long live our victory! Glory to the valiant warriors who defended the honor, freedom, and independence of our motherland. Glory to the great Soviet people, the victorious people. Glory to the inspirer and organizer of our victory, the great party of Lenin and Stalin. Glory to our wise leader and commander, Marshal of the Soviet Union, the great Stalin. Hurrah! "50 artillery salvos resound in a triumphant salute. By the historical museum, a formation of young drummers stands in columns of 10 by 4. The fanfare players signal the start of the parade.
Фанфаристы дают старт параду.
Marshal Rokossovsky leads the triumphal march of the victors.
Триумфальное шествие победителей.
The winners step onto the square cadets of the 2nd Moscow Military Music School. To the beat of their drums, Marshal Rokossovsky raises his saber in a solemn salute to those standing atop the Lenin Mausoleum.
Приветствует стоящих на трибуне мавзолея.
The march of the fronts begins. The northernmost front, the Karelian Front, is the first to march. It is led by Marshal Meretskov, hero of the Soviet Union.
Мерецков.
The longest front of the Great Patriotic War,
Отечественной войны.
its warriors relentlessly crushed the enemy in the forests, swamps, and rocky terrain of the north.
Болот и скал севера.
Thanks to the Karelian Front's combat operations, the USSR's borders with Finland and Norway were restored.
На границе СССР с Финляндией и Норвегией.
'Победный
The procession is accompanied by the combined brass band of the Moscow garrison, conducted by composer Major General Chernetsky.
под руководством композитора генерал-майора Чернецкого.
140 soldiers of the Karelian Front were awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union.
Героя Советского Союза.
They have brought their battle-hardened banners from the distant Arctic.
из далекого Заполярья.
The Karelian Front marches. 5 battalions of the composite regiment advance in a solemn march. Infantry, artillery, tank crews, sappers, signals troops, long-range aviation pilots. The infantry battalion leads the way. In the first rank, march officers with drawn sabers, followed by soldiers carrying Mosin rifles at the shoulder.
Вовками Мосина в положении на руку.
The Mosin Nagant, a reliable bolt-action rifle, has been the infantry's primary weapon since World War I.
Годы со времен Первой мировой войны.
Карельский фронт.
As the Karelian Front departs the square, the Leningrad Front steps onto the cobblestones. It is commanded by Marshal Govorov, hero of the Soviet Union.
Маршал Говоров. Для каждого сводного полка оркестр исполняет свой марш.
For each composite regiment, the orchestra plays its own march. The battalions of the Leningrad Front advanced to the march of the Leningrad Guards Rifle Divisions, a musical tribute to their brilliant combat victories. The command group of the front passes, saluting with sabers. A group of front commanders marches past, their sabers raised in salute. 36 standard bearers carry the battle flags of the most distinguished units and formations. In total, 425 combat banners will take part in the parade, each one a symbol of supreme heroism and sacred pride. Behind the color guard, the infantry battalions advance. For long, grueling months of the siege, the soldiers of Leningrad held back the enemy at the gates of the hero city, standing firm to the last man. The procession continues in battle order. The composite regiments march across the square in strict formation, maintaining the same order in which they held the front lines from north to south. Following protocol, the troops curve around the historical museum, preparing to begin their regimental march past the Nikolskaya Tower of the Kremlin. Army General Bagramyan, hero of the Soviet Union, leads the valiant banners of the First Baltic Front. The composite regiment is commanded by Lieutenant General Lopatin. Also a hero of the Soviet Union, the troops wear brand new parade uniforms, specially tailored for this historic occasion. For the first time, officers don sea green dress tunics instead of the traditional gray, while enlisted men wear leather belts in place of canvas ones. Moscow and Moscow region garment factories produced 15,000 sets of uniforms in just 1 month. The soldiers of the First Baltic Front fought their way to the Gulf of Riga and delivered the final blow to the enemy's Samlin group. Their step is firm to the strains of "The Joy of Victory." The Third Belarusian Front advances under Marshal Vasilevsky. Next comes the composite regiment of the Third Belarusian Front, led by Marshal Vasilevsky, hero of the Soviet Union. Marshal salute and the procession of the Third Belarusian Front. The Marshal salutes those standing atop the Lenin Mausoleum before proceeding to the grandstand. The Third Belarusian Front had the historic honor of being the first Soviet force to cross into fascist Germany and storm the key to East Prussia, the city of Königsberg. Victorious warriors march past the mausoleum, carrying their battle standards. These are far from all the front's banners. For the parade, each composite regiment selected 36 of the most distinguished colors from their combat units. The soldiers proudly bear their standards as the march hero plays for the 3rd Belarusian Front's composite regiment.
Для сводного полка 3-го Белорусского фронта звучит марш «Герой».
The 3rd Belarusian Front contingent consists of 7 battalions. The 5th Battalion comprises tank crews wearing their standard-issue black tanker overalls and helmets, normally worn only during unit service or tank column movements, never for parades.
Предназначена только для ношения в части или на марше танковых колонн, но не на параде.
Moreover, insignia are not typically affixed to these coveralls. But for this parade, an exception was made. Now the tankers' black helmets stand out prominently from afar.
Теперь черные шлемы танкистов видно издалека.
Second Belarusian Front's procession. With Front Commander Marshal Rokossovsky otherwise occupied, Colonel General Trubnikov leads the Second Belarusian Front.
Возглавляет генерал-полковник Трубников.
The command ranks include Hero of the Soviet Union Colonel General of Aviation Vershinin, Colonel Generals Popov and Fedyuninsky. Twice Hero of the Soviet Union Colonel General Batov.
Советского Союза генерал-полковник Батов.
The warriors of the Second Belarusian Front liberated Belarus, eastern Poland and Prussia, executed a heroic breakthrough at the Oder River, and reached the Baltic Sea coast.
Одері і вийшли на побережжя Балтійського моря.
They destroyed strong enemy forces occupying the Gdynia and Danzig defensive regions, enabling the First Belarusian Front's advance on Berlin.
Сильные укрепрайоны, обеспечив наступление Первого Белорусского фронта на Берлин.
A grand military spectacle. The marching troops create a magnificent display, precise geometry, perfect rhythm, exact spacing and speed, with orderly ranks, columns, and battalions. For optimal viewing, cameras are positioned at key vantage points around Red Square and nearby buildings, atop State Department store, the Historical Museum, and the Kremlin Spasskaya Tower behind the mausoleum.
Исторического музея на Сенатской башне Кремля за мавзолеем.
Glorious standards of the First Belarusian Front. In place of Front Commander Marshal Zhukov, General Sokolovsky leads the procession.
Жукова ведет за собой генерал Соколовский.
The command ranks include Hero of the Soviet Union Colonel General Kolpaki, twice awarded the honor, Colonel General Katukov, twice Hero of the Soviet Union Colonel General Chuikov, Hero of the Soviet Union Colonel General Kurbatov,
Генерал-полковник Чуйков. Герой Советского Союза генерал-полковник Горбатов.
The soldiers march to a historic march composed by Major General Chernetsky, their steps keeping perfect time with the music of victory. It was the soldiers of the First Belarusian Front who captured the Reichstag and raised the victory banner over Berlin.
Стагом и водрузили знамя победы над Берлином.
By order of Marshal Zhukov, the sacred relic, the assault flag of the 150th Rifle Division, was delivered to Moscow on a special flight.
Специальным рейсом доставлен в Москву. На гостевой трибуне
On the guest stand is the Minister of Defense of Poland, Marshal of the Polish Army, and recipient of the Soviet Order of Victory, Michał Rola Ziemierski. General Kordzich leads the column of Polish soldiers.
польских воинов.
Representatives of Polish formations march, concluding the parade procession of the First Belarusian Front. Together, they fought for the freedom of the fraternal Polish people, and together, they now march across Red Square.
Вместе и сегодня маршируют по Красной площади. Сводный полк первого
The composite regiment of the 1st Ukrainian Front is led by Marshal Konev, twice hero of the Soviet Union. The marshal's name is closely tied to the defense of Moscow and the brutal Battle of Rizhev. Under his command, troops fought brilliantly in the Berlin and Prague operations.
Войска под его руководством блестяще действовали в Берлинской и Пражской операциях.
The front standard is proudly carried by Guards Colonel Pokryshkin, 3 times hero of the Soviet Union.
гвардии полковник Покрышкин.
The composite regiment is commanded by Guards Major General Baklanov, hero of the Soviet Union.
Гвардии генерал-майор Бакланов.
In the color guard are heroes of the Soviet Union and holders of the Order of Glory.
Орденов славы.
The soldiers marched to the Old Jaeger March of 1813, the very year the Russian army crushed Napoleon's forces and liberated the countries of Western Europe. Since then, the Jaeger March has stood as one of the musical symbols of our victories.
Западной Европы. С тех пор егерский марш является одним из музыкальных символов наших побед.
From the steppes of Ukraine to Prague, the legendary soldiers of the 1st Ukrainian Front marched thousands of kilometers, liberating Ukraine, Poland, Silesia, Saxony, and Czechoslovakia from the invaders.
Польшу, Силезию, Саксонию и Чехословакию.
7 battalions of the composite regiment of the 4th Ukrainian Front. Leading them was the hero of the Soviet Union, Army General Yeremenko.
Армии Еременко.
В командующий
Among the front's command were Colonel General Grechko, hero of the Soviet Union, Lieutenant General of Aviation Jakdanov, and Guards Lieutenant General Bondarev, with Major General Brezhnev as the political deputy.
лейтенант Бондарев, замполит генерал-майор Брежнев.
15 minutes before the start of the parade in Moscow, rain began to fall, turning into a heavy downpour. The soldiers march with 3 Mosin linear rifles at the port arms position.
На руку.
The officers leading the front ranks of the infantry battalions, when aligning with the grandstand, salute with their sabers in the shoulder arms position.
Салютуют саблей в положении на плечо.
The Stalingrad March, composed by Major General Chernetsky, plays a tribute to the Red Army's heroic deeds in one of the war's bloodiest battles.
Марш посвящен героическим подвигам Красной Армии в одной из самых кровопролитных битв минувшей войны.
The front's troops fought from Stalingrad to the Black Sea coast, bravely broke through the Carpathians into Europe, liberated southern Poland and Czechoslovakia, and enabled the offensive along the Warsaw-Berlin axis.
Чехословакию и обеспечили наступление на Варшавско-Берлинском направлении.
The composite regiment of the 2nd Ukrainian Front marches across Red Square, led by Marshal Malinovsky, twice hero of the Soviet Union.
Его возглавляет дважды Герой Советского Союза маршал Малиновский.
The command ranks include heroes of the Soviet Union, Colonel Generals Jmachenko and Pliev,
Жмаченко и Плиев.
These soldiers liberated Ukraine and created the famous Korsun-Shevchenkovsky cauldron against the Germans. Their victorious path stretched from Belgorod to Budapest.
Победы от Белгорода до Будапешта. Будапешта.
The 6th Battalion features brave Kuban Cossacks, heroic cavalrymen now marching on foot.
Кавалеристы. Сегодня батальон конно-механизированной группы проходит пешим строем.
These fearless warriors were among the first to defend the motherland,
На защиту Отечества.
proving invaluable in difficult terrain across all major battles.
Казачьи части сражались во всех значимых битвах войны.
The southernmost front, the 3rd Ukrainian, marches under Marshal Tolbukin,
Главе с маршалом Толбухиным.
with famed commanders including Colonel General Biryuzov, Colonel General Glagolev, and Lieutenant General Stoichev.
Советского Союза генерал-полковник Глаголев, командующий болгарской армией генерал-лейтенант Стойчев.
These troops carried Russian military glory from the Don River to the Alps, liberating Bulgaria and its capital Sofia, and driving Germans from Vienna.
Их гор. Они освободили Болгарию и ее столицу Софию, изгнали немцев из Вены.
The Navy's composite regiment enters Red Square in parade formation.
Строем вступает сводный полк наркомата военно-морского флота.
Hundreds of thousands of sailors received awards, including 513 heroes of the Soviet Union.
Орденами и медалями. 513 человек – герои Советского Союза. Из них 7 удостоены этого высокого звания дважды.
A march honoring Red Fleet heroes plays as 5 battalions of victorious sailors march in 20x10 columns across the cobblestones, led by Vice Admiral Fadiv.
Колоннами 20 на 10 по брусчатке проходят 5 батальонов моряков-победителей.
Сводный полк военно-морского флота возглавляет вице-адмирал Фадеев.
5 stern flags, including the legendary cruiser Aurora's standard, wave over the square.
Аврора развиваются над главной площадью страны.
The Black Sea Battalion follows, defenders of Odessa, veterans of Sevastopol's defense, participants in assaults on Kerch, Novorossiysk, Konstanta, and Varna.
Участники героической обороны Севастополя, десантов и штурмов Керчи, Новороссийска, румынской Констанцы и болгарской Варны.
River and Lake Fleet supported ground operations.
Участвовали в наступательных операциях сухопутных войск и создавали оборонительные рубежи.
Sailors of the Danube and Dniester flotillas march in the 2nd Battalion.
Идут во втором батальоне.
The Danube flotilla defended Soviet borders from the war's first hours on the 22nd of June, 1941.
С первых часов войны, с рассвета 22 июня 41 года.
The Dniester flotilla was the only naval unit participating in the Berlin operation.
Флотское подразделение, участвовавшее в Берлинской операции.
During the Battle of Stalingrad, the Volga flotilla provided fire support to Red Army units, ensured the delivery of supplies, and evacuated civilians and wounded, including to floating hospitals on the wartime Volga.
В том числе и в плавучие госпитали военной Волги.
Now, the 3rd Battalion of the Navy's Composite Regiment marches forward. Baltic Sailor Artillerymen. These are the men who destroyed German divisions during the heroic defense of Leningrad, took part in the liberation of Tallinn and Liepaja, and fought for the islands of the Vyborg Gulf and the northern shores of Lake Ladoga. The 4th Battalion consists of Northern Fleet sailors. They ensured the safe passage of ships along the Arctic's northern sea route, one of the lifelines of Lend-Lease and the Arctic convoys.
В 4-м батальоне идут моряки Северного флота. От них зависело безопасное движение судов в Арктике по Северному морскому пути, одному из путей Ленд-Лиза и Северного конвоя.
Together with ground forces, the White Sea Flotilla defended sea lanes and fought on the distant approaches to the Kola Bay and Murmansk.
Вела бои на дальних подступах к Кольскому заливу и Мурманску.
Bringing up the rear is the 5th Battalion Cadets from the Frunze Higher Naval School and the Order of Lenin Dzerzhinsky Naval Engineering Academy. Future testers, engineers, designers, and commanders of the heroic Soviet Navy.
Училище имени Дзержинского. Будущие испытатели, инженеры, конструкторы, командиры героического советского военно-морского флота.
Liberating their sacred homeland from the invaders, Soviet sailors fought with courage and determination, displaying true heroism, self-sacrifice, and valor.
Героизм, самоотверженность, доблесть и отвагу.
As the last ranks of sailors passed the mausoleum,
Поравнялись с мавзолеем.
the orchestra suddenly falls silent.
Смолкает.
To the ominous roll of 80 drums, a column of Soviet soldiers approaches the mausoleum. 900 captured enemy banners, brought from Germany, are carried in grim procession. In unison with the dry drum beat, the veterans march in perfect step.
900 плененных вражеских стягов было доставлено из Германии. В унисон с сухим барабанным боем, твердо печатая шаг,
Frontline soldiers bear the lowered battle standards of defeated Nazi divisions. The banners nearly drag along the wet cobblestones, now the only remnants of Hitler's once feared regiments and divisions. The soldiers hurl the defeated symbols of the Third Reich's pride and honor at the foot of the mausoleum.
полотнища почти волочатся по мокрой брусчатке. Сейчас это единственное, что напоминает о былых полках и дивизиях Гитлера. Бойцы с силой швыряют к подножию мавзолея поверженные честь и гордость Третьего Рейха.
To parade the enemy's flags in disgrace and cast them at the victor's feet is a tradition of history's greatest commanders. With a dull thud, the flagpoles strike the ground, their cloth shrouding the granite. A mountain of shame grows a burial mound for Nazi relics. The idea of publicly executing enemy banners was shared by the great Suvorov himself, whose troops practiced a ritual of contempt, not for the defeated foe, but for their vanquished military insignia.
Полотнища устилают гранит. Растет гора предаваемых позору нацистских реликвий. казни вражеских стягов разделял и великий Суворов, в войсках которого был ритуал небрежения не к неприятелю, а к его поверженным военным отличиям. И вот снова играет военный марш.
The Veterans Battalion leaves the square. Troops from the Moscow garrison now enter Red Square. First comes the parade formation of students from the Frunze Military Academy.
Войска московского гарнизона. Проходит парадный расчет слушателей военной академии имени Фрунзе.
Which has trained tens of thousands of officers. 28 of its graduates became marshals of the Soviet Union and chief marshals of military branches. The Academy's famous alumni include legendary Commander Chapiev, Marshals Budyani, Konev, Malinovsky, and Tolbukin, as well as Generals Govarov and Chuikov.
Малиновский, Толбухин, полководцы Говоров, Чуйков.
Next march students from the Dzerzhinsky Artillery Academy,
Академии Красной Армии имени Дзержинского.
whose graduates developed world-famous weapon systems.
Вооружения, созданные ее выпускниками.
Then comes the Zhukovsky Air Force Academy, the world's largest and oldest aeronautics school.
Плавание. Военно-воздушная академия имени Жуковского.
Whose alumni lead design bureaus, aircraft factories, and research institutions.
Заводы, научно-исследовательские учреждения.
Students from the Military Institute of Foreign Languages follow. The institute produced thousands of military translators during the war.
Из стен института вышли тысячи военных переводчиков.
The procession continues with cadets from higher military schools. The Moscow Red Banner Infantry School marches in parade formation. This oldest military institution of the Red Army takes pride in its graduates.
Пехотного училища имени Верховного Совета РСФСР. Старейшее военное учебное заведение Красной Армии по праву гордится своими выпускниками, войсковым командным составом.
During the war, it formed a special cadet regiment, whose members were decorated for bravery in the Battle of Moscow.
За мужество и отвагу, проявленные в боях за Москву, курсанты и офицеры были награждены орденами и медалями.
The school trained over 24,000 commanders in 19 graduating classes during the war years. The soldiers carry Mosin 3-line rifles.
3000 командиров. В руках воинов трехлинейные винтовки Мосина.
Next comes the Voroshilov Military Academy of Chemical Defense. Chemical troops destroyed the enemy with flamethrowers and provided smoke screens for forces.
С помощью огнеметов и осуществляли дымовую маскировку войск.
Two People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs motorized rifle divisions approach the mausoleum. These are Special Forces troops.
Идут войска специального назначения.
Battalions of the 1st Division are armed with carbines and Tokarev SVT semi-automatic rifles.
Винтовками системы Токарева, СВТ.
Приветствуя трибуны мавзолея,
The soldiers hold their weapons at the present arms position when saluting the mausoleum stands. The second ranks display support weapons, Degtyaryov DP infantry machine guns with pan magazines.
пехотные пулеметы Дегтярева, ДП, с секторным магазином.
After passing the mausoleum, the soldiers shift their weapons to the shoulder arms position.
Положение на плечо.
With measured steps, the soldiers march solemnly across the cobblestones. Their rifles at the shoulder position emphasize the flawless precision of their ranks.
Безупречную четкость шеренг.
This is the 2nd Motor Rifle Division of the People's Commissariat of Internal Affairs. Seasoned warriors stand in formation. Their traditions of patriotism skillfully channel the might of military units to fulfill the most demanding missions.
На решение самых разнообразных задач.
In battalions armed with self-loading rifles, the second ranks are reinforced with Degtyaryov machine guns equipped with drum magazines.
Пулеметом Дегтярева с дисковым магазином.
The soldiers of this battalion march with Mosin rifles at the ready.
С винтовками Мосина.
From the Historical Museum marches the composite regiment of Suvorov Military School cadets.
Идет сводный полк воспитанников суворовских училищ.
4 battalions of young cadets, dressed in their distinctive black and red parade uniforms with white gloves, step onto the nation's main square.
Площадь страны.
These heirs to the finest traditions of Russia's Imperial Cadet Corps, the schools were established in 1943. The first students were sons of Red Army soldiers fallen in battle, along with young sons of the regiment, child soldiers who had followed combat units.
Войны красноармейцев и сыны полка.
Some cadets marching proudly across Red Square today are combat veterans themselves, their chests bearing government decorations.
Красной площади, неся на груди правительственные награды.
In parade formation follow cadets from Gorky Military School, Tuver Military School, Oriol Military School, Tula Military School.
Тульского военных училищ.
The marching contingent concludes with the Central Military Technical School of Service Dog training of the Red Army.
Школы служебного собаководства Красной Армии.
During the war, 70,000 canine soldiers served at the front in specialized battalions, sled dog units, medical evacuation teams, guard and sentry details, mine detection squads. Through brutal combat conditions and impassable terrain, dog sled teams delivered thousands of tons of ammunition and supplies.
По полному бездорожью ездовые собачьи упряжки привезли тысячи тонн боеприпасов и продовольствия.
Messenger dogs accelerated delivery of critical dispatches, while their units laid 8,000 kilometers of telephone wire.
Было
Medical dogs rescued hundreds of thousands of wounded from battlefields.
Двое сотни тысяч раненых бойцов.
The most fearsome were the anti-tank dogs in living weapons that destroyed hundreds of German armored vehicles at Moscow, Stalingrad, Voronezh, and during the Kursk salient battles.
Сталинградом, Воронежем, на Курской дуге.
The sapper dogs, with their flawless ability to detect explosives underground and under snow, checked thousands of kilometers of roads, helped clear tens of thousands of minefields, buildings, warehouses, and bridges, and aided in the liberation of cities like Minsk, Kharkiv, Kiev, Odessa, Lviv, Warsaw, Vienna, Dresden, and Berlin.
Харьков, Киев, Одесса, Львов, Варшава, Вена, Дрезден, Берлин.
The motherland highly values the service of military dog handlers and their loyal companions.
Собаководов и их питомцев.
Now, brave cavalry units approach Red Square.
Отважная кавалерия.
A constant presence in military parades and a symbol of the Red Army's victories since the Civil War.
Со времен гражданской войны.
The contrasting colors of their uniforms and equipment highlight how perfectly the horses are matched in size and gait.
Как эффектно подобраны лошади по массе и рисунку.
The animals were prepared well in advance for the parade, trained to endure the roar of engines, the sharp sounds of gunfire, and loud music.
Нады и громкой музыки.
Thanks to the spikes on their horseshoes, they do not slip on the wet cobblestones.
И скользят по мокрой брусчатке.
At a trot, the Composite Cavalry Brigade passes by, led by Lieutenant General Tereshchenko, head of the Red Army's Budyonny Higher Cavalry Officer School.
Начальником высшей офицерской кавалерийской школы Красной Армии имени Буденного.
The legendary commander of the Red Cavalry never abandoned his troops, even after the Civil War.
И после гражданской войны.
During that conflict, the cavalry was the Red Army's spearhead, a battering ram, and a symbol of its might.
И символом Красной Армии.
Budyonny's cavalry army included armored trains, aircraft, and rifle divisions.
Авиация, стрелковые дивизии.
Comrades Stalin, Budyonny, and Voroshilov, forged in the fires of the Civil War, shared a long-standing bond of military brotherhood.
Связаны давней боевой дружбой.
The Red Cavalry also played a crucial role in the victory over Nazi Germany. Their mobility and effectiveness in winter battles were proven during the counteroffensive near Moscow, when General Dovader's cavalry corps crushed retreating German forces.
Преимущества в зимних боях были отмечены во время контрнаступления под Москвой, когда конный корпус генерала Доватора громил отступающих немцев.
Later, combined cavalry mechanized groups fought alongside tank armies in breakthroughs of German defenses.
С танковыми армиями на участках прорыва немецкой обороны.
Behind the cavalry rolls a full artillery battery.
Конная артиллерийская батарея.
The famous tachankas, symbols of the Civil War.
Символ гражданской войны.
The four-horse chariot, known since ancient times as the quadriga, found its Soviet counterpart in the machine gun tachanka. These fast-moving carts, providing continuous fire support,
Боевых колесниц и традиций триумфальных шествий победителей. Высокая скорость тачанок, непрерывное огневое прикрытие помогали наступлению конницы.
Became a key element of cavalry offensives. Their main weapon was the mounted Maxim machine gun.
Станковый пулемет «Максим».
Thanks to horse-drawn transport, field artillery could traverse impassable roads, dense forests, and mountainous terrain.
Труднодоступным лесистым и горным местностям.
Budyonny and Voroshilov, renowned cavalrymen, the USSR's first marshals and comrades since the Civil War, remained inseparable.
Советского Союза служат вместе со времен Гражданской войны.
Budyonny, a legendary cavalry commander and expert horseman, played a major role in reviving Soviet horse breeding, developing new breeds like the Tursk and Budyonny horses.
Юный много делает для возрождения советского коневодства. Выводит породы лошадей Терскую, Будённовскую.
The parade of Red Army military equipment begins.
Расчетов боевой техники Красной Армии.
Now, Red Square welcomes anti-aircraft artillery, the defenders of Moscow's skies during the war's darkest days.
В ночи первого этапа войны охраняла она священное небо Москвы.
The 1st Machine Gun Air Defense Division rolls in, featuring ZIS IS-5 trucks, nicknamed 3-tonners, from the Stalin plant,
Машины завода имени Сталина ЗИС-5.
carrying crews manning heavy DSK, Degtyaryov-Shpagin machine guns.
Пулеметов Дегтярева-Шпагина ДШК.
Next comes light anti-aircraft artillery, taking up positions. Armed with twin 25mm autocannons, the 94 km anti-aircraft gun was designed to destroy low-flying and diving aircraft at ranges of up to 2.5 kilometers.
Летящих и пикирующих самолетов на расстоянии до 2,5 километров.
On the march are 85mm anti-aircraft guns. These weapons struck genuine terror into German pilots, engaging aircraft at distances of up to 15 kilometers.
Огонь по самолетам на дальности до 15 километров.
Designer Dorokin was awarded the Stalin Prize for developing this artillery system.
Этого орудия сталинскую премию.
The guns are towed by American Studebaker US 66X6 trucks.
Автомобили повышенного
All-terrain and heavy-load vehicles were supplied to the Soviet Union under the Lend-Lease program.
по ленд-лизу.
В ночное время
During nighttime, fog, or cloudy conditions, anti-aircraft artillery was assisted by the Prozvuk station, a system combining searchlights and sound detectors.
прожекторные установки и звукоулавливателей.
The 2nd Searchlight Air Defense Division moves across Red Square. Powerful searchlights helped anti-aircraft batteries and fighter aircraft neutralize enemy planes.
Прожекторы помогали зенитным батареям и истребительной авиации обезвредить самолеты противника.
These searchlights would detect, track, and illuminate enemy aircraft in the sky with their beams, turning brightly lit planes into easy targets for anti-aircraft gunners.
Ярко освещенный самолет становился легкой целью для зенитных батарей.
The searchlights didn't work alone. Following the searchlight troops came sound detection systems with a range of up to 9 kilometers. They could detect enemy aircraft by the distant hum of their engines, locate the sound source, and direct searchlights accordingly.
Вражеский самолет по отдаленному гулу мотора определяют источник звука и направляют туда прожектор.
4 mobile acoustic horns and sound equipment were mounted on ZIS-6 trucks, which also carried the crews, many of whom were women during the war.
Там же размещаются и боевые расчеты, в которых во время войны часто служили женщины. Сегодня они
Today, these veterans are participating in the parade. The 97th Guards Mortar Regiment approaches Red Square on their rocket artillery vehicles. The orchestra plays the March of the Guards Mortarmen, one of the most technically challenging marches to perform.
Играет марш гвардейцев-минометчиков, один из наиболее технически сложных для исполнения маршей.
The Guards' rocket artillery Katyushas earned the affection of all Red Army soldiers, from privates to marshals.
Гвардейские реактивные минометы «Катюши» завоевали любовь всех воинов Красной Армии, от рядовых до маршалов. Их залпы
Their salvos struck panic into the fascists and boosted the morale of our troops. Soldiers of the Third Reich called the BM-13 Stalin's organ because of the sound made by the rocket's fins.
органом Сталина из-за звука, издаваемого оперением ракет.
BM-8 and BM-13 rocket launchers roll forward, their projectiles capable of striking targets 5 to 8.5 kilometers away.
дальность стрельбы от 5 до 8,5 километров. Боевые машины
The procession includes BM-31 combat vehicles with massive 310mm rockets, representing the 40th Guards Mortar Brigade.
гвардейской минометной бригады. Они увеличили
These systems dramatically enhanced the mobility and rate of fire of Soviet heavy rocket artillery.
артиллерии.
На главную
Now, entering Red Square is the honor guard of the Red Army's formidable field artillery.
полевой артиллерии Красной Армии.
Passing the Lenin Mausoleum are towed field mortars, Sikh, including the MT-13 160mm mortar, a weapon unmatched by any other army during the war.
Нового миномета, как МТ-13 160-го калибра.
В наступательных
In offensive operations, these mortars proved exceptionally effective at suppressing and destroying enemy forces entrenched in fortified positions. Now, legendary anti-tank guns of 100 and 122mm caliber roll onto Red Square.
22 миллиметра. Тяжелые дальнобойные
These heavy long-range guns mercilessly destroyed enemy tanks, easily piercing their armor.
Это их боялись
Even Hitler's feared King Tigers trembled before them.
королевские тигры.
трудно представить
It's hard to imagine a battlefield without these gods of barrel artillery.
полной артиллерии. Именно на долю артогня пришлось
Indeed, artillery fire accounted for the greatest number of enemy casualties.
врага. Справа на трибуне
On the right side of the mausoleum's podium stands Chief Marshal of Artillery Voronov.
проезжают
Following are howitzers of 122 and 152 mm caliber. With barrels midway between guns and mortars in length, these howitzers deliver plunging fire from concealed positions. Nothing equals them for mass destruction of enemy forces, demolishing trenches, bunkers, and fortifications. This is Soviet artillery, the force that razed enemy reinforced concrete fortifications to the ground, reducing the forts of Königsberg, Breslau, and Poznan to rubble. The roar of its guns became Berlin's lasting memory of defeat. Now legendary Emelias, 150 2mm ML-20 howitzer guns, passed the reviewing stand, towed by Ya-12 tractors. Their telescopic sights enable direct fire, while artillery panoramas facilitate plunging fire. These formidable weapons also arm Russia's most powerful self-propelled guns, the Su and ISU-152. The parade continues with heavy and super-heavy artillery, 152mm, designed to demolish the enemy's strongest fortifications. American Alice-Chalmers tractors tow BR-2 2mm guns, weapons capable of hitting rear area targets and destroying fortifications with direct fire. The B-4 howitzer is one of the most powerful and destructive artillery systems. Along the streets of Berlin, the howitzer fired direct shots from breaches in walls, street corners, and behind gates, firing 100 kilogram shells capable of destroying a Tiger tank or an entire infantry battalion. The Germans nicknamed it Stalin's sledgehammer. The B-4 howitzers proved exceptionally effective in breaching fortified lines, assaulting fortresses, and during urban combat in major cities. The artillery review culminates with the appearance of special power guns. Voroshilovets heavy tractors tow massive 210mm and 305mm guns and howitzers weighing 44 tons each. During fortress assaults and street fighting, not even aircraft could match their destructive capability. Next come the BR-5 280mm mortars with their short-barreled, high-angle fire design on tracked carriages, towed by Alice-Chalmers tractors. These largest caliber guns, developed in the Soviet Union, were manufactured at the Barricade plant, hence their BR designation. Now armored and mechanized forces enter Red Square. The review begins with a composite motorcycle battalion.
подводный мотоциклетный батальон.
The legendary Soviet M72 heavy motorcycle with sidecar and DP machine gun takes the lead. Based on a BMW design but significantly improved, it features
В основе
a balanced and powerful engine, smooth suspension, exceptional battlefield reliability.
Теперь у мотоцикла уравновешенный и мощный мотор, мягкая подвеска, высокая надежность в использовании.
In two parallel columns along the historical and Kremlin passages, 169 motorcycles of the Composite Motorcycle Battalion advance 6 abreast onto the square.
59 мотоциклов сводного мотоциклетного батальона.
The sidecar motorcycle is a formidable combat vehicle. The machine gunner in the sidecar provides suppressive fire while moving, covering the advance. His fire is supported by the crew's submachine gunner.
Управление наступления. Его поддерживает огнем автоматчик экипажа.
Dramatically enhancing troop mobility, these motorcycle units enable infantry to make rapid advances. They prove indispensable for breakthrough teams, reconnaissance missions, and maintaining communications between units.
А также для осуществления связи.
During the war years, 870,000 units of military equipment were produced. From the very first days of the invasion, Soviet citizens rose to defend their homeland. People from all Union republics, factory workers, collective farmers, and labor organizations donated their personal savings and portions of their wages to support the war effort.
Личные сбережения. Отчисляли заработки на нужды фронта.
Voluntary contributions and donations from citizens became widespread. Prominent writers such as Sholokhov, Tvardovsky, Lebedev-Kumak, Marshak, and Mikhalkov, aircraft designer Ilyushin, and composer Khachaturian donated their royalties and Stalin prizes to the defense of the motherland.
Хачатурян передали свои гонорары и сталинские премии на оборону Отечества. Полностью наличные средства
An entire Yak-7 fighter was built using the personal funds of Messing, while General Bagramyan financed a T-34 tank. Thanks to donations from scientists, engineers, teachers, doctors, clergy, and believers, tank columns, fighter squadrons, submarines, and tens of thousands of military vehicles were built and handed over to the Red Army.
Подводные лодки. Десятки тысяч единиц боевой техники. Тяжелая для Родины
During these difficult times for the motherland, the entire Soviet people demonstrated complete unity of purpose and action.
действий.
продолжает смотр.
The armored vehicle review continues with a battalion of BA-64 armored cars. These Soviet armored vehicles, based on the all-wheel drive GAZ-64 chassis, were indispensable for command reconnaissance, communications, and supporting reconnaissance groups.
ГАЗ-64 незаменимы для командирской разведки, связи и обслуживания разведгрупп.
Благодаря повышенной
Thanks to their high mobility and light weight, they were used in pursuing retreating enemy forces, battlefield command, and airborne operations.
проходлении боем авиадесантных операциях.
Бронеавтомобили вооружены
The armored cars were armed with a Degtyaryov tank machine gun mounted in the front of the turret.
части башни.
В экипаже двое.
The crew consisted of 2 men, a driver, mechanic, and a commander, who also served as the machine gunner.
Для ближней обороны
For close defense, the vehicle was equipped with fragmentation grenades and the crew's personal weapons.
боевая техника уходит
The military vehicles leave Red Square in 2 columns across the Bolshoi-Moskvoretsky Bridge and Vasilyevsky descent toward the embankment.
к спуску на набережную.
По историческому проезду
Meanwhile, a battalion of airborne troops enters the country's main square via the historical driveway. They are easily recognizable by the parachute emblems on the sides of their trucks.
Парашютов на бортах грузовиков.
These paratroopers earned the Elite Guards designation during combat operations for their unmatched courage and heroism.
Сформированные по ходу боевых действий воздушно-десантные дивизии получили звание гвардейских.
Next enter the Su-76 self-propelled guns,
Вступают самоходные установки Су-76.
built on the T-70 light tank chassis and armed with a 76mm ZIS-3 divisional gun.
70 и вооружены дивизионной пушкой ЗИС-3 76-го калибра.
These light assault guns engage at 200 to 300 m-meters,
С расстояния 200-300 метров.
providing infantry support as both assault guns and tank destroyers.
Бой поддержки пехоты как штурмовое орудие и противотанковая установка.
The open crew compartment, while exposing the crew, allowed excellent visibility and coordination with infantry.
Но и помогала экипажу координировать действия со своей пехотой.
Fighting alongside foot soldiers in urban assault groups, the Su-76 became a true instrument of victory, second only to the T-34-inch production numbers.
Настоящим инструментом победы. Объем ее выпуска уступил лишь количеству произведенных танков Т-34.
Now come the legendary Soviet tanks that crushed Germany's best armor.
Которой не устояла новейшая немецкая техника.
The iconic T-34, Mall case, symbol of victory,
Самый известный из советских танков – символ нашей победы.
whose superiority in mobility and cross-country performance even enemies acknowledged. Its long-barreled gun could penetrate 60mm armor at 1,000 meters.
Пушка пробивает 60-миллиметровую броню с дистанции 1000 метров.
Flamethrowing TO-34 tanks follow with their unmatched 150-meter flame range.
34 с непревзойденной боевой мощью. Дальность их огнеметного выстрела достигает 150 метров.
Perfect for eliminating entrenched positions, immune to conventional tank or artillery fire.
Ликвидация огневых точек, находящихся в укрытии и недосягаемых для огня артиллерии и обычных линейных танков.
The Su-100 tank destroyers, based on T-34 chassis, proved deadly against heavy German armor. In urban combat, a single shot could obliterate enemy strongpoints.
4 самоходки уверенно боролись с тяжело бронированной немецкой техникой. Су-100 незаменима и в городских боях. Одного выстрела достаточно, чтобы буквально сдуть обнаруженную огневую точку противника.
With majestic rumble, the IS-2 Joseph Stalin heavy tanks complete the armored procession. Their 122mm guns capable of destroying any fortification or armored vehicle. One of the world's most formidable tanks, represents the pinnacle of Soviet heavy armor, massively armored and powerfully armed.
Советских серийных танков.
The ultimate breakthrough tank, it proved devastating in large-scale Red Army offensives, particularly in urban combat.
В крупномасштабных наступлениях Красной Армии, особенно при штурме городов.
Its 122mm main gun could engage enemies at long ranges, while the roof-mounted Dshk heavy machine gun served dual roles: anti-aircraft defense and street fighting.
Дистанциях. Зенитный пулемет ДШК, кроме поражения воздушных целей, незаменим в уличных боях.
The lead vehicle carries the brigade's battle standard.
Знамя танковой бригады.
Behind the scenes, technical and repair crews worked tirelessly to prepare the parade. Since dawn, fuel trucks, recovery vehicles, and tank repair teams stood ready on Red Square.
Дежурит эвакурота, тягачи, танкоремонтные бригады.
A dedicated traffic control unit directed the flow of armored vehicles across bridges and embankments.
Они распределяют потоки боевой техники на мост и набережную.
The ISU-152 self-propelled guns roll forward with crushing majesty. Nicknamed the Beast Slayer by Soviet crews and can opener by the Germans, its massive ML-20 howitzer could rip turrets clean off Tigers and Panthers.
МЛ-20 успешно пробивала лобовую броню и отрывала башни немецких «Тигров» и «Пантер», за что немцы прозвали ее консервным ножом.
As a siege gun, it leveled entire buildings and fortifications during urban combat.
Как штурмовое орудие во время городских боев, буквально равняя здания и огневые точки противника с землей.
Its heavy armor allowed direct fire engagements impossible for conventional artillery under machine gun fire. To the strains of a military march, the fearsome machines depart Red Square, an unforgettable display of victory's arsenal.
Артиллерии массированный пулеметный и снайперский огонь представляет смертельную опасность. Под музыку военного марша танкистов грозная боевая техника уходит с Красной площади. Незабываемое событие, смотр оружия победы завершен.
Завершает
The parade concludes with a spectacular military band.
парадающего духового оркестра. Огромный сводный оркестр
A glittering 1,000-strong ensemble led by Major General Chernetsky.
в 71-й раз
For the 71st time, the legendary conductor marches at the head of his musicians.
в парадном строю. Главный дирижер парада
As the chief parade maestro approaches the Lenin Mausoleum grandstand, the final chords echo across the square.
бравые музыканты
The gallant musicians, full participants in this parade,
сегодня они исполнили
have performed 36 musical pieces today.
композиции. Впервые за четверть
For the first time in a quarter century, the powerful and majestic strains of Mikhail Glinka's Glory resonated across the square, its solemn melodies dear to every Russian heart.
Ее торжественные напевы
These noble refrains now blend into Chernetsky's final march, Glory to the Motherland, filling the square.
Чернецкого, звучащим сейчас на площади.
оркестров
38 military bands from Red Army academies and units, 1,313 musicians under 50 conductors, advance across the full breadth of Red Square.
50 капельмейстеров движутся во всю ширь Красной площади.
Триумф
The triumph of the Red Army, the Victory Parade, concludes.
в сопровождении начальника
Accompanied by Chief of General Staff General Antonov, Marshal Zhukov descends to greet representatives of foreign military missions.
приветствовать представителей иностранных военных миссий.
The Marshal exchanges handshakes with delegation leaders from France,
Миссии представителями Японии,
Japan,
Югославии,
Yugoslavia,
Франции,
France,
Великобритании,
the United Kingdom,
Соединенных Штатов Америки,
the United States,
Югославии, Румынии,
Romania,
Болгарии, Китайской Республики.
and the Republic of China.
На гостевой трибуне много
Military translators crowd the guest tribunes.
площади революции тысячи трудящихся.
Revolution Square teems with thousands of workers. The morning rain cannot dampen this great celebration. Under umbrellas, faces glow with joyous pride.
И счастьем радостные лица.
From Kievsky Station across Borodinsky Bridge, a festive procession marches toward the nation's main square. Decked in banners, placards, and flags, with singing and band music, the demonstration embodies the people's victory.
Музыкантами, с пением и оркестрами демонстрация направляется к главной площади страны.
Columns of workers march forward, flowing down the 25th of October Street and Kirov Street, along Spartakovskaya and Solyanka Streets, Smolensky Boulevard, and all major thoroughfares of the capital.
И Солянки, Смоленскому бульвару, другим главным улицам и площадям столицы.
Human rivers converge on Red Square, their momentum overpowering even the rain.
Они сильнее потоков дождя.
Here come Moscow's districts.
Москвы,
Proletarsky, Oktябрьский,
Октябрьский, Красногвардейский,
Krasnogvardeyski, Stalinsky, Timiryazevsky, Таганский,
районы города.
Banners flutter with portraits of party and government leaders, comrades Stalin, Molotov, Kaganovich, Mikoyan.
Кагановича, Микояна.
Proud workers carry placards bearing the names of Moscow's greatest factories.
Предприятий столицы несут лучшие рабочие, передовики производства.
The very Goryachkovtsy labor heroes who forged victory's weapons through sleepless wartime nights.
Ковали они оружие победы.
At Borovitsky Gate Square, the human tide swells.
Реки людей.
Rain-slicked roads and sidewalks only heighten the brilliance of the city's festive decorations and radiant smiles.
Сияющего убранством и улыбками города. Каждый испытывает волнение от причастности к событию огромной важности.
Overcome with emotion at being part of an event of immense significance.
Переходят в массовые народные гуляния.
The solemn processions gradually give way to mass public celebrations.
Утопает
Moscow is drowning in a sea of elation and overwhelming pride. Orchestras thunder, universal jubilation reigns, and the streets bubble with festive merriment.
царит всеобщее ликование. В праздничном веселье бурлят улицы.
The city dances and rejoices.
И радуется.
The victors are literally carried on shoulders all day long.
на руках.
The nation marvels at its glorious warriors,
Со своими славными бойцами.
and the Red Army's triumph echoes joyously in the hearts of the entire Soviet people, sparking eternal gratitude to our soldiers and boundless admiration for their feats.
Вызывает вечную благодарность нашим воинам и чувство бесконечного восхищения перед их подвигами. К вечеру распогодилось.
By evening, the weather clears. The sky flickers with solitary flares from signal rockets harbingers of the salute to come. Thousands gather on Red Square, awaiting the festive fireworks display.
Площади в ожидании праздничного салюта собрались тысячи людей.
The capital's streets and squares, adorned in holiday finery, glow with illuminations. The sky is pierced by the blazing beams of powerful searchlights, the same lights that defended Moscow in the grim year of 1941. This searchlight division also took part in the Berlin offensive, sowing panic among the enemy.
41-м. Прожекторная дивизия участвовала и в Берлинской операции, вызвав у врага панику.
142 searchlights aided our troops in storming the Silo Heights. Tonight, their beams chart a course for victory, lighting up Moscow's peaceful sky.
Сегодня прожекторы взяли курс на победу, высвечивая мирное небо над Москвой.
Hundreds of searchlights are positioned across the city, their radiant rings expanding from the Kremlin to the Outer Ring Road.
Световыми кольцами от Кремля до окружной дороги.
Along the boulevard and garden rings, shafts of light salute the festive capital.
Лучи света салютуют праздничной столице.
At 23 o'clock Moscow time, the sky erupts in a multicolored firework salute.
Озаряется цветным салютом.
From hundreds of balloons raised by anti-aircraft gunners, thousands of colorful rockets shoot skyward, joined by ground-launched fireworks. A blindingly bright beam flashes, followed by another, then another. The rays catch and lift a gleaming order of victory into the heavens.
Вспыхивает мощный яркий луч. Ему вторит другой, третий. Лучи подхватывают и поднимают ввысь сияющий орден победы.
The city is bathed in the light of victory. Crimson banners wave. The people exult and cheer. Glory to our vast and sacred motherland.
Народ торжествует и ликует. Слава нашей необъятной священной Родине!
Thus passes this historic day,
Этот исторический день
a triumph of Soviet military strategy and armed might,
полководцев и вооруженных сил
a triumph of the victorious people and their indomitable spirit, a demonstration of courage, unyielding will, and the valiant tradition of triumph.
несгибаемой воли к победе и доблестной традиции побеждать.